Hi everyone, welcome to Module 11. Today we're going to be talking about persuasive speeches and elements of how to make an argument. And this is going to be really important for your next speech because you really need to know the fundamentals of what should be in an argument and why arguments are important. So first going down, let's talk about persuasive speaking in your persuasive speech. So the goal of a persuasive speech is to influence audience members' attitudes, beliefs, values, and actions. And I think the big thing to take away from this one is you can't change someone's beliefs or values, but what you can do is change their actions, which eventually influence values and beliefs. And so a big thing about persuasive speaking is finding a solution or an everyday thing that people can do and your audience is willing to do. And in order to do that, when you're giving your speech, you have to show what the problem is, how you're able to resolve it, and if you don't resolve it, what that impact will be. Because if you're able to show what the impact is and what's happening now in a way to resolve, that will also influence their attitudes towards listening to potential resolutions for what you are doing and can change actions in the long run, which eventually change beliefs and values. A big thing in order to change someone's mind, though, is utilizing motivation. So use information from audience analysis, make the message personally relevant to the listeners. The listeners need to want to do it in order to be motivated to take action for whatever you're calling for in your persuasive speech. Make sure that the message is personal to them. Make sure that they really, really want to make the difference or make the change that you are attempting to demonstrate for them. And make sure that you also demonstrate the benefit to the audience of doing so. And I think that's isolating the impact and how you're able to resolve the impact ultimately with your solution. Also, establishing credibility is really important. In order to establish your credibility, you do have to do research for this persuasive speech. You have to do a good amount of research in order to show that you know what you're talking about, but isolate the instances where you have found really important things that need to be addressed. And make sure you set modest goals in this one. Make sure that you have a goal that can be obtained. You're not solving for all of global warming, but you can solve for recycling in your own town, right? You can create initiatives that allow us to do one thing at a time rather than solving for the big issue at large. And I think this is where you need to understand the difference between like incremental change and like overhaul or a complete revolutionary change. And in this class, when we're doing persuasive speeches, and in the future when you're giving a persuasive speech, although it's nice to know about that utopian promise that we're given and that goal of a perfect society or a perfect world that we're able to solve for, I think it's very important to also isolate that. But we have to take that one step at a time, and there are small things that we can do, which is your modest goal, whatever your speech is. And make sure to appeal to whatever motivates the audience members. Encourage receptivity to change and recognize that motives arrives from needs. So create a need. Create whatever need it is that you need. That's what we see in commercials is a need has been created, whether it's through just a problem that most common people have or establishing the problem through ethos, pathos, and logos. So for persuasive appeals, it happens through this ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, for example, speaker credibility, where the moral character or trustworthiness and goodwill of a character exists. So making sure the audience views you as credible, which increases their level of receptivity. You might have a bunch of citations, which means that you have the logic behind you. But what makes you credible from those citations is noting where they're from or where you found them and making sure that that's a credible area from which you did find them in the long run. Pathos is appealing to emotion. So pathos is really important in the persuasive speech because you want to paint vivid imagery and tell a compelling story of the issue that's going on that has to be resolved. Use that repetition and parallelism in your style, the way that you speak, and your voice of how you speak, and base these emotional appeals on sound reasoning. Make sure that what you're saying is not just like a false tale of some tragedy, but make sure that it's still based on a form of sound reasoning. And combine ethos and logos for best effect. So when you have, logic behind you and credibility, that emotional appeal just really pulls people in and really makes them realize that you, one, have sound reasoning, but also are credible enough to listen to. And that's when you can really use pathos to appeal to the emotion of the audience and really commit them to changing not attitudes and beliefs, but at least start changing their actions. Finally, logos. This is logic, appealing to reason. So when you hear the logos side of things, that just means that you will probably have a specific lined out area in which you are organized, you have really compelling evidence, and you have good data to support your evidence. So making sure that you're doing a lot of research and you're following your research and your data is correct and coming from good sources. That's how you have the best logos coming out of any speech that you're inevitably going to give, because it forces listeners to think critically about issues that you've found and really ties it all together. But looking specifically at argument elements and how we can argument elements, I think, falls really under that logos. How can we organize our evidence and our arguments in a way that makes it really compelling? And I think you do this through a claim, evidence, and a warrant. So your claim in any argument is your position. It states your conclusion based on the evidence that has been found. So the sky is blue. That is my claim. The sky is blue. Evidence for that? Oceanographers have found that when the light bounces off of the ocean, it reflects over the sky, and the sky becomes blue. My warrant here provides reasons and evidence, provides reasons and the evidence is valid. Because oceanographers know what they're doing and have found that the sky is blue, based on the evidence of like the prisms in the sky, we conclude that the sky is blue. So you have your claim, and then you have the evidence, and then your warrant ties the two together. So remember, claim, then the evidence, then the warrant ties the two together. So if I would have said, oceanographers have found that prisms of light make the sky blue, and my claim was, if the sun went out, we would not have a blue sky. Based on the evidence that I have found that light is key to making the sky blue, we would not have a blue sky if there was no light. That last statement was my warrant, tying that evidence to the claim. Right? Does that make a little more sense? I guess I can't get any feedback right now, but if you have any questions on this too, we can do some problems to help us work through it, kind of like you do logic proofs, but with just a little bit more work and examples, it's easy enough to figure out. Identify the nature of your claims. So there are three different types of claims. There's a claim of fact, there's a claim of value, and there's a claim of policy. For the persuasive speeches, we're having a claim of policy, but you need to know the difference between claim of fact and claim of value, because I have a tendency of having a lot of students use claim of fact and claim of value as their thesis for this next speech. So listen to this part because it is important. So your claim of fact declares something is true or will happen. Global warming is inevitable. Here's all the reasons why global warming is inevitable. I haven't proposed a solution. I haven't proposed a way that we can resolve things like global warming. It's just going to happen. Claim of value addresses issues of judgment. Global warming is caused by an unethical society. So I'm looking into the efficacy of society and how it has been caused by global warming. So think about value, judgment claims. These are claims of value. A claim of policy is always going to have should. It's going to have an actor that should do something. So, for example, claim of policy. The United States federal government should create a comprehensive plan to fight off global warming. Donald Trump should create an executive order to shut down or give more funding to the EPA. One or the two. Texas Tech should increase the amount of recyclable containers across the university in order to promote better policies of recycling. These are all claims of policy because it recommends a specific course of action. Specific. It gives you a specific thing to do, not just like a broad thing, we should fight off global warming, but it gives you a specific way to do it with an actor. And that actor should do this. Okay. So with each of your claims of policy or a persuasive speech, we have evidence. So there are a few types of evidence that we talked about before with secondary and primary sources. There's external evidence with examples, narratives, testimony, facts, and statistics. These are the things you're going to be using under each one of your main points on your persuasive speech. The audience pre-existing knowledge of opinions, reaffirming listeners' own attitudes, beliefs, and values needs to be taken into account before you are stating things. So if you think people already believe in global warming, then you don't have to put an abundance of information out there over global warming is real. If anything, you can look specifically at the causes of it based on your listeners. Now, if you're in a room full of people that don't think global warming is real, then the majority of your evidence is going to be over why global warming is having an effect on the ozone layer, that type of thing. And also know your own expertise. So make sure that you are very knowledgeable about what you're talking about. Do not come up and spitball something of a speech that could exist. I want you to know your speech and I want you to know the area of research that you're covering. Offer in conjunction with other evidence, which means that, you should know your argument enough to know what the counter argument to your argument is. And full circle, have arguments against what the other side would say in your speech. So in your speech, make sure that you have your own argument, but also tie into it why the other side doesn't have an argument. And last but not least, let's look at warrants. So warrants is kind of hard. We talk about claims, we talk about evidence, and what your evidence should look like, statistics, data, but warrants are really hard for people to understand. So your warrant is not your data. It is not that statistic that ties things together, the scientific method that makes it true. Your warrant is what appeals the audience's needs and emotions. So it's based on pathos, and it really looks like that's motivational warrants. But you have authoritative warrants that also appeals to credibility on ethos, and then substantive warrants that uses facts and evidence to justify an argument based on logos. So regardless of what your warrant is and the type of warrant that you have, it needs to be tying your evidence back to your claim. So because of this evidence, we see that this is the claim. And then you state your claim. So make sure that you're not just saying your claim and then just the evidence. You should have one sentence on the top saying your claim, and then you should have a justifying sentence before your evidence. And then after your evidence, you need to have something that ties it back to the top. Your warrants are the tie. Your warrants is what ties your evidence back into that claim. So we'll go into a little bit more of what the structure of your speech should look like.